Hello. Have you been working in IT for a decade or so, and you have been looking for any certificate for architects in IT industry? You must have come across TOGAF. Uh, you might be thinking of learning about it, and also probably thinking of getting TOGAF certified. And if you have started reading the TOGAF, you might get overwhelmed by the information present on the Open Group website. This presentation will help you understand TOGAF and how to prepare for TOGAF Foundation Certificate. What is TOGAF? And if you watch this video carefully and understand the concept shared in this presentation, then you can assume that you are already done half the preparation for the TOGAF Foundation exam. So TOGAF has two exams. One is TOGAF Foundation. The current version is TOGAF 10, and the another exam is TOGAF Practitioner. There are very few people who have done TOGAF Practitioner certificate. Most of the people do TOGAF Foundation certificate, and I believe the TOGAF Foundation certificate is quite good to help you understand the enterprise architecture. I will prepare a separate video on differentiating between the enterprise architects, solution architects, technology architects, and other architects. And I would like to mention that TOGAF is specifically for enterprise architects. And you can go to the Open Group website. You can read about TOGAF. There is a TOGAF library, which is a collection of all the ideas plus a lot of additional useful materials such as guidelines, templates, patterns, and reference materials. And TOGAF library is a section of the Open Group library, so which contains many useful materials useful for enterprise architects. So Open Group library contains a lot of materials and that are relevant to other standards like IT for IT standard, digital practitioner body of knowledge, uh, open agile architecture standard, open business architecture, and so on. Whereas in that library, the TOGAF library is specifically for the enterprise architecture. Now, Open Group is a open group, and it's comprised of members from major organizations. And these people come together, they exchange information, they create standards, they also create certificate programs. Certificate programs related to agile, cloud computing, digital business, TOGAF, security, and so on. Now, the contents are present in the Open Group library. In that, there is section TOGAF library, and TOGAF library includes TOGAF standard. And there are TOGAF library of materials, which are pocket guides, white papers, data sheets, reference cards, etc., etc. They're all actually useful materials for EAs. Whereas if you're looking for the TOGAF Foundation certificate, or you're just starting with TOGAF, then you have to go through the TOGAF fundamental concept. TOGAF fundamental concept is again a big guide. It's available online. I think you can't download the PDF format, but if you need PDF format, you can comment on this video and I can provide. Whereas you can also go through online, and that fundamental content is divided into 6 parts. First is the introduction and core concepts. Now, introduction and core concepts is the very important, and you can just read this first chapter, which is introduction and core concepts, and try for TOGAF Foundation certificate because it covers most of the concepts. It will introduce you to the TOGAF. Second is architecture development method. So this provides the details about how we actually create the architecture for an enterprise. Now, while creating the architecture, we apply some techniques also. For example, one of the aspect of creating the architecture might be collecting the list of all the stakeholders, and then while preparing this stakeholder list, and how to communicate with them. You might use a ADM technique related to stakeholder management, and and there are many other techniques in ADM techniques. Fourth chapter is applying the ADM. It tells you about you actually can modify the ADM, adjust the ADM, or customize the ADM based on your context, based on your enterprise, based on your how much time you have, how much detail you want to go, what all areas you want to cover. So accordingly, you can modify the ADM. There is also architecture content because this chapter tells you about how you create, maintain, manage the contents related to architecture because during the course of this architecture development, an architect prepares a lot of content, and all those contents go into architecture repository, how you're going to structure the repository, how you can use standard naming conventions. And the last chapter is about enterprise architecture capability and governance. This chapter is about how you build the enterprise architecture capability of the organization and also define the governance structure around it. There are TOGAF series guides, very useful, but you don't need to read them for the foundation exam. Even I have not read those series guides yet, but I am planning to do it. Go through those series guides. So TOGAF standard, like on previous slide, we said that okay, TOGAF standard has 6 chapters, and it's the fundamental content to provide the essential and established best practices that are stable for the architects. And there are universal concepts like you can once you study TOGAF or you become TOGAF certified or not, but if you use this TOGAF nomenclature, you can work anywhere in the world. And then there is TOGAF series guide, which is an extended guidance, and it uh, it provides content which are content and guidance on specific topics, such as like how to create business scenarios, how to create business models, and how to create business capability map, and so on. Um, Moving on. So one of the core concept in TOGAF is enterprise, and so if you are coming from a technology background or you have been working as a technology architect, then you know that okay, your scope of architecture work is defined is within the boundary of an application or within the boundary of a project or a program. Whereas if you're a solution architect also, then also you are working on a specific projects or at the same time working on multiple projects, but all those projects are solving a particular business problem and you provide the solution for that business problem. I mean, IT solution. Whereas the enterprise architects, they deal with the entire enterprise. They are not limited to a particular application or a specific business problem, but they are like it's an ongoing activity, enterprise architecture, and it includes all the departments of the company. It includes all the tools, applications being used in the organization, and and but it's the boundary of the enterprise architect is the enterprise. And what is an enterprise? Enterprise can be a collection of organizations. For example, a corporate which can have multiple organizations. Like in India, we have Reliance, which has multiple small organizations. There is another company, Bajaj, which has multiple organizations, Bajaj Finance, Bajaj Alliance. And so organization may create multiple legal entities depending on how they want to control the organization, how they comply with the regulations, and so on. But enterprise architect scope might include all those organizations or few of those organizations. Whereas enterprise can also be a collection of departments within an organization. So, for example, if there is a global bank and like HSBC, Citibank. and they might have few verticals which are totally acting independently, and within those verticals might have many departments. An enterprise architect scope might be those one vertical, for example wealth management vertical, and that wealth management vertical may be looking after the entire geographically distant wealth management companies of HSBC, because they are all linked with common ownership. An enterprise may also include partners and alliances working together, such as like if the company is a marketplace, for example, Amazon and Walmart, and they might have some supply chain that might include some key partners and suppliers, and also some key revenue partners. An enterprise scope might include the entire supply chain. So when an enterprise architect is looking into enterprise, when the enterprise boundary is defined, enterprise architect look after all the business or analyze all the business activities, capabilities, information, applications, technologies that make the entire infrastructure and governance of that enterprise. And it includes partners, suppliers, customers, as well as multiple business units. And it will include multiple systems and many functional groups. Um, the enterprise operating model is a concept that used to determine how the enterprise architects work in an organizations. For example, we can have a centralized enterprise architect team looking after the entire enterprise, or we can have distributed enterprise architects team for different business verticals, or we can have a federated that can be a mix of centralized and decentralized. That is called enterprise operating model. Fundamentally, enterprise architecture has four domains: business, application, data, and technology. Now, the business is there is a business architecture for the business that includes what all things business does, how business delivers value to the customers, also the business structure, I mean organization structure, how business operates. There are many things which are covered as part of business. And like for example, there is a bank. Now in that bank, there is a capability to onboard a new customer. Now that onboarding a new customer capability might be partially finished online and partially in the branch. So business architecture includes all these branches, online, everything. Now, second aspect of enterprise architecture is the application, which is all those applications are being used within the organization. So and if you are a solution architect, your scope is generally more on this area, application, wherein you design a solution that can be an integration of multiple applications, exchanging information and data among each other, and making changes into more than one applications and creating a solution. Then there is a data part, and enterprise architects also look into the data architecture. Most likely, like based on my experience, I limit myself to the information architecture, not the data architecture. But we can say, or you can my work is limited to the conceptual data architecture, not the physical data architecture. And lastly, enterprise architecture also includes technology architecture, like all those technology stacks being used within the organization, like RDMS, operating systems, Windows servers, programming languages. What is the technology architecture? So technology architecture is more like a physical architecture. Mm, let's assume that okay, any company which wants to enter into wearable devices business, and they will involve the enterprise architecture to prepare the architecture. And enterprise architect will also first look into the what all business capabilities are needed to build this, and then they will look what all applications are needed, and what kind of data, what kind of information they will be capturing, what will be the information or model for the wearable devices, and lastly, the actual physical technologies like a smart watch, um, and other IoT sensors and so on. The business architecture also includes business strategy, governance, organization, and business processes. And the data architecture includes the logical structure of the information. There is also a physical structure, and there will be dedicated data architects, data engineers looking after the physical data assets. And application architecture, which enterprise architects deal with, is generally a blueprint of how applications will interact and what will be the relationship, how this application map to the business capabilities, and so on. The core of TOGAF is the ADM, and it is a process by how we develop the enterprise architecture. It has phases, and there is an information flow between phases. Each phase gets information in form of documents and or reference, etc., as an input, and it produces some output with extended information. The preliminary phase describes the preparation and the initiation activities required to create an architecture capability. It also includes the customization of the TOGAF framework and definition of architecture principles. Phase A describes the initial phase of the architecture development cycle. It includes defining the scope of the architecture initiative, identifying stakeholders, creating the architecture vision, obtaining the necessary approvals to proceed with architecture development. Phase B is about developing the business architecture to support the architecture vision. For example, there is a company which is a telecom company and it wants to enter into the fintech business. So architecture vision will be the fintech, and then business architecture will define what are business capabilities, etc., and is needed to achieve that vision. Phase C, information system architecture, builds the IT or IS architecture to support the agreed architecture vision. Phase D, technology architecture. It describes the development of technology architecture to support the agreed architecture vision. Phase E is opportunities and solutions, and it conducts the initial implementation planning and identifying those deliverables for the architecture defined in previous phases. And phase F, migration planning, it addresses how we move from the baseline to the target architecture. So when we started this ADM cycle, at that point we had some current architecture, or we call it baseline architecture. And during this phase B, phase C, phase D, we defined the target architecture. In phase C is first time we start analyzing the gap between the target and the baseline, and then we define some transition architectures or some packages like a roadmap. And this planning, actually migration planning, actually starts in phase E, but it completes in phase F, which finalizes the detailed implementation and migration plan. Phase G is implementation governance. So once our plan is ready, there can be multiple projects getting initiated to implement those packages, and implementation governance, wherein the enterprise architects provide an architectural oversight to the implementation teams. Phase H is architecture change management, is establishes the processes for managing changes to the new architecture requirements management. So, and it operates through it operates the process of managing architecture requirements throughout the ADM. And all these phases, we will be collecting the requirements, architecture related requirements, and putting, so requirement management works in parallel with all these phases. TOGAF provides a lot of details on each of these phases, like what all things we do in each the phase. For example, you look at architecture change management. Here we deploy monitoring tools, we manage risk, we provide analysis for the architecture change. So during the implementation, we might identify some new changes and then we can decide whether how we manage those changes. And how in similar actually you can look at what all things we do in phase E and phase F. So this whole actually is available on the TOGAF website. So it looks like ADM is a sequential process, whereas TOGAF says that ADM is iterative because anytime you can go back to previous phase. For example, you have already completed the preliminary phase and then you move to architecture vision phase. And while defining the architecture vision phase, you might identify that we need to make some changes into the preliminary steps of the preliminary phase. For example, we might need to change the way architecture capability or architecture operating model is defined. Similarly, there is an architecture development iteration. So when we develop first the business architecture, then IS architecture, but while building the IS architecture, we identify we can make some changes in business architecture. So we can go back. And in similar, we can anytime when we are doing the migration planning, we might think that okay, no, we need to make some changes to target state, then we can go back. Similarly, between phase Z and phase F, we can do multiple rounds of iterations because in phase Z, we started the migration planning, but in phase E, we identify the work packages, and but in phase F, we define the roadmap of those work packages, how they will be built. But while defining the roadmap, we might need to go back and define some work packages we might need to remove, some work packages can be added so we can iterate. Similarly, while the project implementation is ongoing, we might identify some changes and we might actually changes in the architecture. We capture those changes into the requirements management. We might be incorporating those changes depending on whether it's a small or it can be very big. Then we can initiate a new ADM cycle. Um, for each iteration of ADM, we should determine that okay, what is the breadth? What is the how big is this initiative? I mean, actually, um, look at the breadth of the coverage of the enterprise, and depending on the breadth, we also need to decide that okay, how much detail we will go. For example, we can spend months preparing the business architecture, but we need to define that okay, how much detail we will go for business architecture. Similarly, for IS architecture, practically like last year I'm working on a project and I work very little on the technology architecture because there is a lot of detail I need to work on business architecture and then in IS architecture. But in technology architecture, I depend mostly on the IT teams to or the implementation vendors to provide this technology architecture. Ideally, same level of detail should be provided in phase B, phase C, phase D, but you can customize. Now, third important factor is the time period. How much time we have for this preparing the architecture. Now, enterprise architecture is a continuous thing. It doesn't normally actually start or end, but it's still we need to look at the time period because we cannot just keep on working on enterprise architecture because sometimes in some organizations I have seen that enterprise architects they just document and they are more involved into governance rather than controlling things. So in order to control things, the enterprise architects have to be ahead of everyone else. Lastly, actually, other aspect is what kind of architectural assets to be leveraged um, from within the organization, from outside the organization, and considering all these, we should configure the ADM to meet the context. TOGAF also has some definitions related to the artifacts enterprise architects produce. Mm, And if you are giving foundation exam, then the questions will be coming straight like a definition. Like they might ask that, okay, there is a work product that is contractually specified. What is that work product? Whether it's a deliverable or it's an artifact or a building block, and you need to select deliverable. So deliverable is what we actually give to the client. Sometimes, like for example, a architecture document. And artifact is a artifact are which we produce, which can be part of the deliverable also. Like in the past, when I was working as a solution architect, I used to prepare a solution architecture document, and in that solution architecture document, I used to put different kind of diagrams depending on different levels. I used to follow C4 model and I prepared multiple diagrams and all those diagrams they were artifacts. But my contract didn't say that okay I will produce those diagrams. Whereas my contract said that okay I will provide them an architecture document. And there is a building block also which represents a reusable component that can be combined with other building blocks to deliver architectures and solutions. So we had a solution which was about KYC solution, and it was reused into multiple different architecture activities. So initially this KYC solution was let's don't go to solution. Let's talk about architecture because TOGAF differentiates between architecture and solution. So architecture defines what functionalities we need, and solution actually defines what components will be used to implement that functionality. So there was an architecture for a KYC and there was a KYC solution. So KYC solution had a lot of details like which APIs were used, where the data and how everything. Whereas architecture just provided the functionalities and sub capabilities of the KYC and which systems were directly engaged at a high level. And this was an KYC was an architect is was a building block that we reused in onboarding customers for multiple different businesses. Uh, Architecture continuum and architecture repository. So architecture continuum provides the methods for how we classify the architecture and solution artifacts. And generally, when we will start working on some architecture, we might get some generic architectures from the industry. And then we will adapt those generic architectures to the organization specific architectures. So if, for example, there is buy-in framework for banking industry, there is TM forum for telecom industry. In similar, I think there is a call for insurance industry. So there are standard industry architectures which can be used. And then we can generalize, modify them or adapt them to the organization needs. And enterprise continuum, it provides the this classification method that okay how we classify all those things. Enterprise continuum has two parts: architecture continuum and solution continuum. So architecture continuum has all those architecture building blocks, and solution continuum contains all those reusable solution building blocks. The practical implementation of architecture continuum is the architecture repository. So, but you can assume that architecture repository is the repository where we are putting all these artifacts, everything, whereas enterprise continuum is a interface or like a tells us how we organize the contents within the architecture repository. TOGAF actually also defines the architecture levels. So typically in an enterprise, we can define architecture at multiple levels. So we can define it at the entire enterprise level, which can be a strategic level. So, and then there can be segment architectures, which can combine few departments, or it can combine few projects or for a portfolio. And then there is capability architectures, so which are individual capability architectures. So for example, like you are defining the architecture for a banking company, bank, and we can say that okay, the entire bank is a strategic level. Then we need to define those segments within the entire strategic level, and then within those segments there are capabilities. So customer management is a capability, and how we will achieve the desired customer management capability for a bank, because the customer management in a bank will include a lot of things. It will include how the customer experience. It will also include customer relationship management. It will include onboarding new customer, many things, many things. And or we can say that okay, customer management is a top level capability. Inside it will have multiple sub capabilities, but those sub capabilities will also be big. And we can't achieve everything in one go. That's why we will define increments for each sub capabilities, like how we will achieve them. For example, we are implementing customer relationship management within an organization. So customer relationship management is a sub capability of customer management, and sub customer management is part of the entire enterprise. So, and customer relationship management in itself is also not a small thing. It will be implemented into multiple phases. There will be a roadmap, and in each phase, we will actually achieve something additional. So we call this incremental, and we need to define these incrementals for each capabilities. Normally, actually, if there is an enterprise architect team and they work in a federated operating model, what they do is that they distribute this work based on first they slice and dice the enterprise into segments and capabilities, and then they distribute the work among themselves. At the same time, they collaborate to bring everything together, but they also work individually within each capabilities. Um, so Um, an important part of the preliminary phase is to establish the architecture capabilities, and architecture capability should include how we create the architecture partitions. That is, how we create different partitions within the enterprise so that we can distribute the work within the enterprise architect team. So that includes first we define the architecture team structure, and then we define the responsibilities of the teams. It can be multiple teams or it can be multiple just individual EAs. And for each team or each individual, we define the partition. We define like in that partition, like, okay, what subject matter areas that team will look after, to what level of detail they will go, and what will be their time period, what will be their stakeholders. And they also define the relationship between those partitions. So there is someone looking after the product domain and someone looking after the partner domain. But they also need to collaborate together, because when organization is building a product in collaboration with a partner, then the partner management and the product management will work together. So there is a relationship there. But then there can be customer management also, and then customer management will again collaborate with product management, partner management, and so on. So transition architectures. So like when we start with ADM, we define first the baseline architecture, and in each phase of B, C, D, when we are building the business architecture, what we do first, we define the baseline architecture and we define the target business architecture. Next, in phase C, IS, also we define the baseline IS architecture and the target IS architecture. Same thing we do for the technology architecture. But then we architects' work is also to define how to achieve that target. And for achieving the target, we need to define some transitions. Now, each transition is an increment over the previous transition. So let's say there is a bank who asks customers to walk into the branch to complete the KYC and open the bank account. And they said that, okay, we are taking this digital transformation initiative, and we want to allow our customers to complete the end-to-end bank account opening journey through web or mobile. Then we can define this target state, and we have the baseline state, but then we need to define these transitions. So maybe the first transition will be like we will tell to customers that, okay, you can upload your documents through our website or using the mobile app. But then for the verification, you have to come to the branch. So when you come to the branch, don't carry the documents, you upload them. So it will be an increment over the previous baseline, where customers also carry their documents to the branch because there might not be any photocopy machine available in the branch. Uh, and then in transition 2, we might say that, okay, to customers that, okay, once you have uploaded the documents, we will verify them in the background. So you only need to come to the branch to sign the document, because when you come to the branch, by that time, those ID documents have been verified. And in similar, we can define more transitions, and all these transitions are realistic transitions, and to finally achieve the target. But the target is hazy. Target, we can modify the target based on these transitions, but transitions we define more concrete. So if our roadmap is to, in 2 years time, we want to achieve the target, and our transition 1 is for next 3 months, transition 2 is for next 6 months after. So we will try to provide a lot of detail into these transitions, but then, and we will keep our target open for modifications. And as we achieve transitions, we might change the target also. Uh, TOGAF actually also says that there will not necessarily be one architecture. There will be alternatives. There are often possibility that uh, there can be more than one possible target architectures that will conform to architecture vision, principles, and requirements. It is also important to identify the alternative target architectures, and build an understanding of different possibilities and the trade-offs between these alternatives. We can define alternatives per domain, um, and then we can merge them for the overall analysis of the alternatives for the whole architecture. So if we have domains uh, wealth management is one domain, then retail is one domain, and then there is credit card one domain. And we define customer onboarding journey for each domains. And then we can combine these three to create a kind of a general customer onboarding journey. But within each domain, when we are defining the architecture, we can have several alternatives. And you can read this on TOGAF that okay, how they say that okay, you should alternatives. You should first create criteria and then define the alternatives. Then you select the alternative. Um, So these criterias actually what we do is that we use the vision, principles, requirements, and all the information available to create these criterias and these criterias fitting for the different alternatives. Then once we define the criterias, we create the alternatives based on criteria and based on understanding of each criteria. And then we select one or more alternatives and combine them to create the proposed architecture alternative. TOGAF provides some guidelines or some guidance that can be used in ADM phases or stages. Uh, these are uh, these are process approaches and they are called techniques. Uh, like TOGAF provides a technique called gap analysis, and then we can use this technique gap analysis in phase B, C, and D, or in in E and F when we are analyzing the gap between the baseline and target. Um, Defining the architecture alternatives, which we saw on previous slide, it's also a technique. Similarly, there is a technique for stakeholder management. For migration planning, also ADM provides some techniques. So if you read this migration planning technique, they will provide some like actually how to define metrics, catalog for migration planning, and so on. Business transformation readiness assessment also there is a technique. So enterprise architects can do this assessment to analyze whether business is ready for this transformation. And TOGAF provides some templates for this assessment, and similar for risk management also. Um, the architects executing the ADM will produce number of outputs, and those outputs will from process flows to architecture requirements, project plans, etc., etc. The content framework provides a structured model for the architecture content, and so there, so architecture content recognizes deliverables, artifacts, and building blocks, and it differentiate between them. And architecture content defines the kind of a, a structure which matches the ADM phases uh, and uh, and tells that okay, what kind of work products, I mean deliverables, artifacts, and our building blocks can be produced in each of those phases. So content framework is a huge and it includes the enterprise meta model, like all those entities and their relationship. Um, so let's say when enterprise architects are working on the business architecture, they deal with value streams, business capabilities, and and they actually will create diagrams or catalogs of value streams and business capabilities. Um, so these are this TOGAF provides these kind of entities which tells that okay, in different phases which entities are relevant. But lot of those entities enterprise architects understand, but the stakeholders will not understand and they might get confused. So for stakeholders to better understand and to better communicate with uh, stakeholders, TOGAF provides different kind of building blocks or catalogs or matrices and diagrams that enterprise architect can produce in different phases. Um, like um, for requirements management, there is a requirements catalog, and then we see different kind of diagrams, value stream map, organization map, information map. These are all actually building blocks, catalogs, matrices, and diagrams that enterprise architects can produce in different, and they are relevant to different phases. Like when enterprise architect is working on a business architecture, they might create these artifacts. So TOGAF content framework is huge. And lastly, this is important that okay, how we can use TOGAF framework to establish the enterprise architecture capability and governance. So we can use the same ADS cycle to establish the EA capability within an enterprise. And let's say we are using this ADM, then we will define the business architecture for the EA capability. That will include the architecture, that will highlight the architecture governance, architecture processes, organization structure, architecture information requirements, etc. Data architecture will define the structure of the enterprise continuum and architecture repository. Application architecture will specify the functionality and application services required for the EA practice. And technology architecture will define the infrastructure requirements, deployment to support the architecture applications. So if EA capability has decided that okay, they will use Lean IX application, and then application architecture will define Lean IX and some other tools enterprise architects might use, let's say PowerPoint, Excel, and so on. Technology architecture will define how this Lean IX will be deployed. There will be opportunities and solutions in which we will identify the organization changes required to establish the EA capability. And in migration planning, we will um, it might define the adoption of architecture process and frameworks. So when we will, so let's say we define, like if there is no EA capability in the organization and we define those EA processes and governance structure, then it will heavily impact the organization because the way of working of organization was without EA capability till now. Now we need to plan this migration, like how these processes we are defining, how they will be adopted by the organization. There will be implementation governance, wherein we will take some organization change techniques or change activities to implement these practices. Um, Architecture change management will be changes of the architecture practice. And then requirements management will be understanding and managing the requirements for the architecture practice, how the work will come to the EA team, how EA team will uh, how EA team will clearly define the requirements which are understood by everyone and so on. Um, Within an organization, uh, when we say architecture governance, we should understand that okay, there is a hierarchy of governance structure, and if we there will be some existing governance also, like corporate governance. There will be some IT governance, technology governance, and we will define the architecture governance. And each of these governance may exist at multiple geographic levels also, like a global, regional, local. And there is a corporate governance which is about ensuring the business is running and conducted properly. There is technology governance which controls how organization utilizes technology in the development, production of its goods, etc. And there is a IT governance also, which provides a framework and a structure that links IT resources and IT information to the enterprise goals. There is a separate framework, COBIT framework, which deals about IT governance. And then there is last is the architecture governance, which TOGAF deals with, and it's a practice by which enterprise architectures and other architectures are managed and controlled in an enterprise. It includes implementing system of controls over the creation and monitoring activities of all the architecture components, and to ensure the effective introduction, implementation, and evolution of the architecture within the organization. Um, it also includes implementing a system to ensure compliance with the internal and external standards and uh, regulatory obligations. It will establish architecture governance will also establish processes that will support effective management of the above processes and also KPIs. And it will also include the developing practices that ensure the accountability to identified stakeholder community. Remember, actually, in ADM, there is a phase G dedicated for implementation governance, but implementation governance is just one aspect of architecture governance. A key element in a successful architecture governance strategy is a cross-organization architecture board to oversee the implementation. And this body comprises of a group of people or executives who are responsible for the review and maintenance of the overall architecture. Architecture contracts are the joint agreement between the development partners and sponsors um, on the deliverables, the quality of deliverables, and the fitness for purpose of the architecture. Successful implementation of these agreements will be delivered to the effective architecture governance. And architecture governance, or sorry, architecture contracts may occur at various stages of the ADM. For example, there will be a statement of architecture work created in the phase A of the TOGAF of the ADM. And in similarly, when mm, enterprise architects will produce these transition architectures, and when they will be implemented, they might be implemented by some vendor company. So there will be some contract with the vendor company how they are going to implement it, the architecture, and so on. Um, Now, architecture compliance, now ensuring the compliance of those projects with the enterprise architecture is an essential aspect of architecture government. And for that, EA team will define some process also, like they will create a project as specific views of the enterprise architecture. And they will also include a project architecture compliance review process so that projects they they come to enterprise architecture team for review, or maybe enterprise architect will be part of the project implementation team, and they will be monitoring how the architecture they created is actually getting implemented. All these topics I mentioned, they are part of the foundation TOGAF exam, and if you understand them, then you can pass. And also, actually, even if you're not giving the exam, this will be helpful for you to work in large organizations where they might already follow TOGAF. Thank you very much. And if you have any suggestions, any questions, then feel free to comment. Thank you.